Showdown in the Badlands is officially out, and here are the best decks so far. The first deck may not be the best deck for Rogue, but it's definitely the one I had the most fun with, and that is the Ogre package featuring Golden Kingpin Pud.
Okay, surely he doesn't beat this one, right? Face. Face. Just that easy, kids. Face. It's just that simple, kids.
Just fucking be better. Just be better. It's not easy, dude. It's so stupid. The game plan is pretty simple. You start off by just playing ogres and the cobalt miners to get your excavates going, but the real win condition is constantly developing a board with Kingpin Pud using cards like Breakdance and Shadow Step to bring it back to your hand. It is a really fun deck, and honestly, it's the most Hearthstone deck I have played in a very, very long time. There is a full video on the YouTube channel if you're curious of how it works, but I can't recommend it enough. There's probably better rogue decks, but this one's definitely worth playing. Probably the best deck of the entire expansion is going to be the Excavate Control Warlock deck. It's basically because the Azurite Snake is kind of broken, kind of falls right into the Warlock's game plan, which is just tapping and fighting for the board. Eventually, you could continue replaying it with Youthful Brewmasters and Saloon Brewmasters. And because the Azurite Snake steals 10 health from your opponents, not only are you pyroblasting them in the face every single time, but you're also gaining 10 life in the process, which means you kind of never die and you constantly kill your opponents. I believe this deck will get nerfed in some way. In the moment, this probably will be the best deck in the format. Probably the second best deck in the format is Dragon Highlander Druid, especially because of the Reno card, but it's also because of Rheastraza being a pretty great Highlander payoff. But Druid is just doing Druid thing once again. Druid just has consistently very good draw. They have very good ramp, especially because they got a brand new card called Splish Splash Whelp, which is very good in a Dragon deck. I think the biggest thing about this deck is that you can kind of play against everything. You have a way to get life. You have a way to fight for the board. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this Reno Jackson card is pretty good. And it's going to be a ongoing tradition here. When I talk about a Highlander deck, it's going to be because of Reno, not because of a lot of other cards. I would highly recommend if you're going to play Highlander decks, get lucky and just draw your Reno on turn 8. It's just that simple. I should also mention that a non-Highlander version of the Dragon Druid deck is also very good, but the additional resources that Rheastraza does give you is a pretty big deal. Speaking of another Reno deck, we have Highlander Paladin. Highlander got a lot of really interesting cards this set, and they all kind of are individually very strong. So you put them into a Highlander deck to make every individual card that you draw just feel pretty great. Their Highlander card is Spirit of the Badlands, which ends up giving you a Mirage in your hand, which is kind of nice because it's like an additional draw in your hand for another minion. The problem is that this is a very value-oriented card, which means it's not going to be the best in almost every matchup. It's going to be good in matchups where you definitely need the resources, but I mean, against the Warlock deck, you're probably going to die. I looked at other Paladin decks, but people weren't really trying them out. People were mainly trying the Highlander package because the other Paladin decks are basically just pure Paladin. Another Highlander deck for you is the Highlander Shaman. This deck actually was doing very well in top 200 legends, so if you're looking for a great way of playing Shaman, this is it. The great thing about Shaman is that it does have a lot of resources to fight for the board in the early game, and it allows you to play your Doctor, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Holiday. I think that's his name. Because you get the Staff of 9 Frogs, it is insanely good as you keep on attacking, and it does do a lot of damage. It's 18 damage if you get to swing with every single charge of this weapon. Of course, Reno is still here because Reno is just very good, and it's way better than the hero power that you get initially with Shaman. Shaman does have cold storage, which not only can give you an enemy minion, but can give you a friendly minion, which means if you want a second Doctor, it's not bad. You can also play the non-Highlander version of Elemental Shaman, which is basically playing elementals every single turn until you get to Scar the Catastrophe. Pretty great card if you're consistently playing it, and the cold storage allows you to get an additional one, which means you could do a lot of damage 2 turns in a row. The one issue with the elemental package is that if you don't maintain a board, it can feel a little lackluster, but overall, if you want to play Elemental Shaman, it's definitely not a bad deck either. Probably the most aggressive list by far is Naga Demon Hunter. During the theory crafting event, I actually died to this on turn 4. So if you're looking for a way to get under a lot of these control Warlock decks, or you're looking for a way to just absolutely stomp a Druid, the main reason why this deck is so strong is because of Blind Eye Sharpshooter. This is just a great way of getting constant damage and drawing spells over and over again, and because Demon Hunter has a lot of ways of playing cheap spells and Nagas, this can do a lot of damage very quickly, and a lot of decks are just not ready to, you know, kind of fight back against the 3-mana 1/5. I mean, you play Nagas, you deal damage, you're doing Demon Hunter things. I think it's pretty obvious what this deck does, but if you're looking to be pretty aggressive this expansion, I would highly recommend it. Next, we have Excavate Death Knight. Now, Excavate Death Knight is rather interesting because Reska is a pretty good card. Also, the Azurite Rat is a pretty good Excavate reward. It's not really as good as the Azurite Snake, but that's beyond the point here. You're also running a bunch of ways of shuffling the plagues into your opponent's deck, because if you're playing against Highlander, if you did not know, plagues can actually make it so there are duplicates in their deck so that your opponent doesn't get the payoff of playing their Reno Jackson on turn 8 and they look like an absolute clown. Your general win condition here is either A, fight for the board and make sure that you don't die to your opponent, or you go for some pretty big swing turns with Reska. You also have the Primus for additional healing or whatever you need. And surprisingly, the Pile of Bones is a pretty great card. The last Highlander deck I am going to show you today is Priest. Priest, generally speaking, is doing the same thing Priest has always done, which is just clear your minions over and over and over again. Their Highlander card, Elise Badlands Savior, isn't the greatest in my opinion. I actually think she's very weak, and I don't think there's a real reason to actually go Highlander other than the fact that, you know, Reno Jackson does exist. That's basically the whole reason you're going for Highlander Priest here. If you want to play Priest and you want to try something brand new, this is the cards I would put into my deck and I would play just to have something spicy. But you could honestly just play Control Priest just like you were probably playing before the expansion came out and probably have a good time. But this card is definitely worth going Highlander for. Also, I should mention for all of the Highlander decks that run ETC, I would highly recommend running the Steam Cleaner just so if you do go against a Plague Death Knight, you are able to destroy all of them into your deck so you can play Highlander cards. The other two cards in your ETC can be whatever you're going against, whatever you need help with. But Steam Cleaner I think is very, very good. One of the most interesting decks here I saw was this weird hybrid Reno deck with Warrior. Warrior did not really get a ton of great tools this expansion. The Excavate package is kind of weak, and I'm not saying this deck is absolutely broken. This guy right here was playing this deck in top 1000 legend and was actually doing pretty well with it. So if you're looking for a really spicy way to play Warrior, this is the deck for you. I'm not really sure if we need this much win conditions. For those of you who are curious, Taunt Warrior is probably an okay deck, but no one's actually trying it in high legends, so I didn't want to put it into this video. If you're having fun with it, that's awesome, but I wouldn't think it's the best way of playing Warrior, especially because Odin exists as a card. I also want to mention this Slime Aggro Warlock deck. It kind of reminds me of the Naga Demon Hunter that I showed earlier, but the basic idea is just get on board, play your barrels of sludge, or get your barrels of sludges in your deck, and then discard them and try to win the game through like Drakon. There is a lot of different ways of playing this. You can fight for the board pretty aggressively because there are 4 mana, where the hell is he? There are 4 mana 7/7s in here, and they actually pair very nicely with the location, which is Forge of Wills, because then you get a 7/7 with Rush as well. I wouldn't call this the best Warlock deck because the Azurite Snake is insane. When I recorded this video, I didn't really see any Hunter or Mage decks really being tried out, at least in top legends. I looked around, it seemed like Sith Mage was probably what you're generally going to go for, and Hunter didn't get a lot of great tools for their Highlander package. On the screen now are 2 decks that you could try out for Mage and Hunter if you generally want to play those 2 classes. Anyways, this is the best deck so far for Showdown the Badlands. Let me know what decks you're playing, and I'll see you guys in the next one.